Hi,
Hey, everybody.
everybody. So, your intuition is wrong. Really. So, we're going to talk about why this might be and what you can do about it. So, I'm Ambajam Rose.
I'm Michael Anderson.
Welcome to Living Your Awakening, episode 11 already. So good to be with you guys. And this is a show where we meet every other week and we offer you guys conversations and tools to help you self-empower, follow your heart, follow your truth, embody your awakening. And so we're just going to dive right into our topic about intuition. And this was a topic that was on our docket for a while. And we have like a whole list of topics, and we just kind of feel into like, what do we, what's right to talk about? And so a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago texted me with this experience that she was having. And I was like, the time is now for this show. So I asked her permission if I could share, her experience. And so this is what happened. So she texted me and she was like, hey, you know how we go into our heart for the truth? And I've been going into my heart and I've been getting these really, really, really strong feelings and these certainties of like, I know these certain things are going to happen. And then it doesn't happen and I'm totally inaccurate. She's like, what is going on? And so we were texting, back and forth, and I was asking her some questions and I was like, what happened? And so her example was she got to apply for this job. And then she was certain, her feelings were she was certain she was going to get it, at least get an interview. And she was like pretty instantly rejected. So she's like, so my feelings told me I was going to get this job and I didn't get this job. So I started asking her questions. Was it really your intuition telling you were going to get this job? Was it really your truth? Like, what was going on? And so as we started texting and I was asking her questions and she was just sitting with it for a while and she kind of like backed it all up, like Monday quarterbacked her situation. She was like, oh, my intuition told me to apply for this job and I should have just left it at that. And basically her idea that she should get the job and she thought she was going to get the job and she had all these feelings she was going to get the job was all this stuff that she piled on top of her original intuition. And so then we talked about it for a little while longer, and then we texted again like a week later. And once she really understood, like, okay, so my original intuition told me to apply for this job and it felt really light and really true. But then I added all this stuff on it. And she's like, and the fact that I didn't get the job and me just applying for the job actually created both my husband and I, to have better work, more money, and all these positive things happen. And I got re-inspired for my work. And she's like, I didn't even want the job anyway. And so as I was texting with her, I was like, girl, we got to do a show on this because so many people experience my intuition is wrong. And we want to talk about a very kind of like specific lane of this thing that we do. So we have our original intuition, but then we pile hope and fantasy and idea and story and all these things on it. And we want to talk about that. And then we'll talk about, other reasons why just truly when your intuition tells you something's going to happen and it doesn't, and it is your intuition, why might that be? So those are kind of two sections that we'll talk about. So we want to start talking about the piling on that we do. So we're going to dive into that. And do you want to just talk about just the logistics a little bit about how to join? And
we're multi-streaming or multicasting on YouTube and Facebook. If you want to ask questions, because we're going to take callers at the end of this and take written questions, you can only do that on Zoom. And how you get on the Zoom thing is you go to livingyourawakening.com and you can register for free and then ask your questions there. So we're not actually looking at the questions on Facebook and YouTube. It's just too complicated. So if you want to write questions or ask questions, just go to our website, register, and then you can get on Zoom and ask those questions.
Yep. And so at any
encourage you to do so.
Yeah, because your interaction
this is
like
all part of it.
like 50-50, like we're half the equation. And then when you guys ask your questions and just kind of add your, your experiences and your thoughts and your heart, it just creates the whole show. So we're going to talk. Usually we talk for about a half an hour and then we open the Q&A up. So on Zoom, you can either type in whatever you just want to share on Q&A and I'll read that, or you can just raise your hand at any point. You can click the little hand icon, or if you're on your phone, you can press *9 and that will raise your hand. So I think for me, I just want to share my one experience that was like really loud of when I added shit on my intuition. And so I was living in New York and I was meditating, and this is when I first was going through my awakening, and I was like unraveling. It was really challenging. And I just couldn't do anything but sit and be quiet for like 8 months, but that's a whole other story. So during my meditation, all of a sudden I felt, go to this store. And I felt this feeling of like, it just felt really true. And I saw the image of the store I needed to go to. So as I'm walking to the store, I started to have this feeling of, oh, I know why I'm going to the store. I'm going to meet the one. And so I was just certain, like, why Spirit's telling me to go to the store is because I'm going to go meet my guy. And I go in the store and I don't meet anybody. And I have this interaction with the guy at the counter, but I was like, that's not why I'm here. And I'm walking back to my apartment completely friggin' devastated because I'm like, I cannot trust my intuition. I thought 100% for sure I'm going to meet my person there. And that experience really had me start to break down like, what is my truth? What is my intuition versus my idea? And so for me, when I start to pile my hopes and dreams and ideas and fantasy and fears and all kinds of things on top of my initial original intuition, what I want to share with you guys is like everything's frequency, everything's energy, right? So when I have an intuition, when I have a knowing, it's so grounded and simple. It's just like, do this. And it has like this rooted strength to it, and it's quiet. And it always feels the same. Sometimes it's louder, let's say, or wider or stronger, but the basis of where it comes from is this simple feeling. Then when I start to add my story to it, my story feels in my head. And I feel kind of like it feels thin. It doesn't have that like solid feeling that my intuition has. And so when I start to do it, because it happens so fast, you get an intuition and then my story about the result, what's going to happen, and why I'm getting to do what my intuition is telling me to do. That's usually what happens, right? You get your intuition and then you give it a result. Oh, I'm feeling to do this because, and this is going to work out like this. And then those things don't happen because it wasn't your intuition telling you that. It was your mind telling you that, right? So for me, my very first practice is like, oh, I'm starting to like leave that solid place and to go into like this kind of this other energy. And because I've gone through this enough, we could say I'm much more aware when I start piling all this shit on it, because it doesn't feel like my intuition. And so what I want to share with you guys is if you can catch yourself, really know the frequency or the energy or like how your intuition feels. So when you have something and you can kind of go back to it, really feel what it felt like. And then you can go, well, did I add stuff to it? Like my friend, she's like, all I was told is to go apply for this job. And then she could realize that she had all these strong feelings, but it was all kinds of reasons why she did those feelings. And so start to just be aware of real intuition and then story. And like when I went to the store in New York and I did not have what I really felt in my body, like it felt like it was going to happen. I was going to meet my person. And the fact that it didn't happen, it almost like oil and water started to separate my mind, emotion, and then my truth, or my mind, emotion, and my intuition. So that's my first experience that happened. So just start noticing, oh, am I going into my mind? Am I going into another experience too, which is kind of, well, it's the same section, I guess. So this person called me, I don't know, 6 months ago or something, and they were in town and they were visiting and they were like, hey, let's get together. I'm like, okay, cool. And my mind goes into this whole idea of why we're getting together and that we're going to create this relationship and all these things. And I only saw this person once, and that was it. And I was like, huh, interesting. And I got to realize like my whole story kind of got off again and started going down this thing, but none of that happened. So when I go back to the original phone call, it's like, yeah, it felt really true to me. That's all I knew. But the rest was my story. And so it's just interesting when you start thinking about like, when did this happen for you? When was it your intuition versus your idea?
It's a really fine line. It's so easy to embellish your intuition, right? It's like taking all the clothes off your intuition to get it back to the basics, right? Because you start putting jewels on it and you start painting its face and doing its hair and all this other stuff. Got a cute little dress and, hair's all coiffed. And
it's like, meanwhile, they're naked.
Exactly. So it is really about boiling it down. I think that would be I've had a lot of different instances with this, but the thing I kept coming back to when I sort of post-game this is the idea of what specifically was my intuition. This was back to what I was talking about, and I've talked about in multiple of these episodes, is this whole idea of the spiritual sommelier, right? It's this idea of being really getting the flavors. See, this whole process of waking up and being on the spiritual path is just really getting to know yourself. It's really getting to know yourself.
Word.
Right?
So true.
And really getting to know the frequency of your truth, getting to know the frequency of all these little embellishments. What are these earring frequencies feel like? What are these hair coiffing frequencies that you add on the story because you're afraid, or you have hopes, or you have these hopes, dreams, fears, all these things that just build upon your story. So it's one of those things about really, as you're going back, a lot of times I think this is easier when something happens to go back. That's where a lot of real learning can happen, is when you have this your intuition and then the events happen. And then you're like, wow, this didn't really me. Can I not trust my intuition? And then you can start asking like really specific questions like, hey, what specifically was my intuition? Like specifically. And then ask questions kind of like, did it actually mean this? Did it actually mean that? Or so that way you can really boil it down to its exactly what it's saying. And then start to notice the flavors of when it's your intuition and it starts to cross the scale, it starts to tip the scale into something else.
You bedazzle it.
Yeah, and you start to bedazzle it, right? Because that is like a very common thing on this. And
it's so common.
And I think that really can undermine your intuition if you don't realize you're bedazzling. Put the bedazzler down. Only people of a certain generation are probably going to remember that.
Bedazzle. Well, and I think to me, like, this information is gold, because it's like we all do it and we don't realize we do it. And because we don't realize our intuition didn't tell her, my friend's intuition didn't tell her she was going to get the job. She did that. Her intuition just said, apply. And it's like we cause our own suffering because we don't know, oh man, I just put my mind all over that. Or, oh man, I put my hopes all over that. Like I caused my own suffering in New York on my way to the store. And it's really hard because these ideas or these hopes or beliefs or stories that we put on our intuition, like it can feel so, quote, true in our bodies until the thing doesn't happen that felt so true, that then makes us relook to go, oh, wait a minute, that actually wasn't my truth that I was going to go meet.
Wouldn't you say that the frequency of that, when you start bedazzling, it's like my intuition, to be specific, is my intuition's like what Ambajan was saying, is like it's very steady and very calm. And when it starts to get exciting or it starts to get emotional, the emotional meter starts to move, then that's for me a flag to say, hey, something, I'm starting to bejewel the intuition, right? I think that's the
Yeah.
thing, is you have to figure out what it is for you.
Yeah, what's that flavor of emotion, hope, fear,
Right.
mind?
For you. How do you do? And what's your pattern? Because you have a pattern. I think the thing is, it's okay to be skeptical of your intuition in the sense of vetting it, right? We talked about that before, which is the idea of really, really vetting your intuition. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can just ask, again, I try to keep it simple into simple yes, no questions, because that just, then you can like, it makes it easier to really focus your energy to like really clarify what your intuition's telling you. So don't be afraid to do that, to really clear. I think, again, this comes back to a lot of basics too, which is the idea of, do you actually want to know? Right? Because that's really, if you don't really actually want to know what your intuition is and you want to believe the bedazzling and the bejeweling.
It's so easy to believe
it's,
it because you want it so bad.
Yeah. So I think that's like a really critical factor. Again, it's just like you do any of this work. When you're doing this, the thing is, again, is be grounded in your body, and really decide clearly whether or not you actually want to know that information. Do you actually want to be in the truth? Do you actually want to know what your intuition's actually telling you without all the fluff? Right?
I mean, to me, this subject is just so like, what? Because everyone does it and we don't know we do it. And then you start talking about it and it's like, oh, wait a minute. Let me like slow down and actually like go learn like you said, you got to learn who you are. Like feel who you are over and over and over and over, because we're constantly shifting, right? We're constantly shifting. And it's like, the more I know myself, the more I know, oh, going in my mind again. Oh, going in my hope. But my intuition, that's not my intuition though.
And I think the thing I want to add to that is, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it.
I think the thing is, again, this is about, again, what we keep talking about is about discernment. It's about being honest, about saying, hey, I'm bedazzling. Just know that, and know what is bedazzling. I love to bedazzle.
Mm-hmm.
I love to bedazzle. Okay? I love it. But I know what it is as best as I can. Sometimes I'm lost in it, but most of the time I know when I'm bedazzling, and I can just be like, I know this is bedazzling. I'm kind of getting off on it. It's okay. But then I know what my truth is really telling me. And I just, you know this, right? This again about this being honest with yourself.
And practice.
And practice, right? And I think, again, what I said before is this sort of post-gaming, this sort of idea of doing this after the fact to like really to sort through what happened and really get clear about, because you can go back and feel the energy of the truth. You can feel the energy of the bedazzling. I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's really important. This whole concept sounds like super simple,
but it's not.
On some level, it is super simple, but this is like this. I can't tell you how profound this really is. This will change your life. That's a bold statement, but I'm going to make it right here, right now.
It's true.
I mean, this has changed my life.
Well, it changed mine in New York.
Yeah. It just gets you, this takes your suffering. I mean, I guess if you like to suffer, okay. But if you don't want to suffer as much and you're bedazzling, this will reduce that suffering substantially. Right?
Yeah. And like my friend and I were texting the other day and we're like, what happens when you just stay with your intuition and you don't add to it? Like, I go to the store, she applies for the job, and that's it. And then you actually wait and see. And, a big reason why we don't do that is, I mean, we're human and we have a mind and we have an ego, and instantly, like being still and being just quiet, the ego is constantly like, what? And so just having our intuition, staying with it, without adding stuff to it is a really interesting practice. And it creates so much presence. Like, this is not an intuition thing, but it's an example of how much presence it creates when you just stay with what is. You just stay with what is. When I first started doing yoga, like 30 years ago, whatever, I went to this class, this Ashtanga class, and I was brand new, but I walked in and I said to this other guy, hey, I'm brand new. Do you think I can do this? He's like, yeah, totally, you'll be fine. So I'm standing there and the teacher is not talking in English. I mean, he's American, but he's talking in Sanskrit about poses. And I'm kind of like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So I just kind of started doing my own thing. He came up to me in front of everyone and said, basically, you need to leave. And he kicked me out of class. I was mortified. And I was rolling up my mat to get ready to leave. And my mind was like, oh my God, it was a horrible shame and embarrassment. And I was just mortified. But all of a sudden, something in me went, hey, all that's happening right now for real is you're just rolling up your mat. That's it. And I started to kind of have space for a second of all this emotion and just horribleness. And I decided to just stay with practice because it was so much, I was suffering so hardcore. I just didn't want to. And I was like, I'm just going to stay with reality and what's real. I'm rolling up my mat. I'm picking it up. Like I was saying this to myself, picking up my mat, walking out the door. I'm shutting the door behind me. I'm standing there with my mat being like, well, now my day is free because my class is over. Now what? And I just practiced that whole day, staying with what is, staying with what is. And I couldn't believe the difference of how I felt. I felt like fresh. I felt like fresh water. I felt so clear compared to how I was like, ah, that teacher, what an asshole. It was like, it took a minute to kind of come out of that suffering, basically. But it was such an interesting practice to just stay with what is. So we have our intuition. What if we practice just staying with it, following it? Watch when our minds are doing the thing, our hopes are doing the thing, and we do what our intuition tells us. And see then what? Right? Really interesting. Like I practiced that when I remember. I mean, because I've been like practicing this for a while of like, up my mind, up my intuition. I don't have to like try anymore in the same way because it's just kind of habit now. But the part that I like to remember and practice is like, I'm just going to stay with what is when my mind starts going, because you just feel fresh. Like you just feel really different. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about the other section too, before we hear from you guys. The other section is when your intuition tells you something's going to happen, or with someone else, some situation is going to happen and it doesn't. Okay. When it's not your mind story, it's not your bedazzling, it just didn't come true. And there's a lot of reasons why that can happen, especially when it's connected to someone else. Because even though your intuition feels so clear that this person that you're involved with you're going to connect with them in a certain way or something's going to happen, they still have to choose. They still have to choose. They're still free will. So if they don't choose what your intuition felt, that's a really different experience than you bedazzled it. And that's why your mind's idea didn't happen, because it was your mind's idea versus I really felt this. Like Michael and I, the last time this happened to us, we were living in Montana. So we live in Jackson, Wyoming now. We went to visit Jackson And we came back to Montana, and in meditation, we both saw this river so slowly going to Jackson. And it was like Jackson was calling us. Oh, it just felt so, like it just felt true. And everything in us started to feel like that's where we were going to go. And it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening. And we were doing all the things, going within, right? Working it, being like, what in me is blocking, or what in me needs healing, and how do I align with this feeling? So as we were doing all this work, we then left Montana to go to Europe. We felt guided, like we have to go to Paris, we have to go to London, and we went to these things. During that time, or right before we left, we felt Jackson go away. We were like, huh? Like what? And it just went away. And I can't remember if it went away right before Europe or while we were in Europe. I think it was before, because I remember us looking at pictures.
It was before.
And so we go to Europe, and we were there for, I can't remember how long, 6 weeks or something. And we had a return ticket to LA. And then we were like, well, we don't know where we're going to live. This was 4 years ago, right? And we were staying at Michael's parents' house. I wasn't working. Like, that's a whole other story that I know some of you know. So we were staying at Michael's parents' house. We didn't have a home. We barely had any money. And we were like, we credit carded Europe. We put everything on a credit card. And we're like, feels true. So our plan was, we're going to go back to LA, and then we're just going to feel what's next, because Jackson's gone. We'll go back to the US and see where we feel to live. So while we were in Europe, we could feel Jackson start turning on again. We were like, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, it just starts coming back online. But we also felt really strongly in our intuition, with no bedazzle, that we were going to meet some people in LA, and there was a possibility of actually living there. And we just felt so just bright and empowered and good. And then we went to LA, and the thing didn't happen. And we felt, and I'm assuming some of you guys experienced this, what I'm about to share. When the thing didn't happen, like both our hearts kind of broke a little bit, because we felt like whoever we were supposed to meet, whatever was supposed to happen, it kind of felt like this gathering of people just didn't happen. People didn't choose, or they chose differently, and our hearts were so sad. Like, it wasn't an emotional sadness. It was like a soul sadness. Like, ooh, this soul thing didn't happen. And we grieved that for a couple of weeks. And then Jackson started turning on more and more and more. Long story short, here we are. But that was like the last time I remember that feeling of, I was supposed to meet with these souls, but it didn't happen. And my heart kind of broke. Like, it's deep. It was deep in there. It's not just an emotional, like, oh, I'm so bummed. It was, my heart broke.
And I think that example actually is kind of twofold, because it's about, sometimes people make choices that then alters your path. And then I think sometimes then another layer of this is sometimes you have an intuition, it's timing.
Yeah.
Right?
That's another layer of why stuff doesn't turn out when you feel like it's going to. It's timing.
Sometimes as you feel this intuition, it's an issue of timing. Sometimes stuff in the universe has to arrange, and either you're not ready for it quite yet, or things haven't quite arranged yet. And so it's a timing issue.
And that's what's really hard, because it's like your intuition feels like something's coming, and it feels really true, with no mind on it, no bedazzling, right? And it doesn't happen. And you've done all the things. You've looked at your issues, you're working on your blocks, you're doing all the things. And it's really hard when it's our own experience to understand, like, why isn't this happening? I'm doing all the things. And whenever I've done readings with people of why something isn't happening yet, that's still true, because you can see the truth in their heart, like, this thing's true. And layers of complication of, I don't even know what to call it, life itself, the divine source, how everything is all connected and there's like this massive mesh of aliveness happening and all these things are connected and how all these things are still working to make the thing happen, but it's shifted and it's changed, and because this person then chose this and this soul chose this, and it's altering when our things manifest. And that's really hard to feel for ourselves because we're attached. We want what we want, right? And it's our own thing. And so it's just really hard to see for ourselves at times. It's really hard. Like that's the deepest practice of like knowing for yourself, feeling for yourself, looking at, quote, being psychic and really feeling and sensing like, what is going on with me? Why did this thing I feel, why isn't it not happening? And it can be really complicated and beyond our, quote, control. And in those moments, it's like, well, all I can do is keep, like, I know what my vibration of truth is, and it still feels true. So all I can do is keep doing all the things and align myself in that energy and get ready.
Right.
And then when life does bring it, or things keep changing and flowing, well, at least I know I'm doing everything in my power to be ready to receive and align with that.
Yeah. It's like, how do you rest in your truth? Right? How can you just, again, that's a choice. It's not necessarily easy, right? How do you rest? Make the choice of like, well, I feel this feels true. It's not happening. Nothing's opening up. But right now I'm going to just rest in that without, that's challenging. That can be really challenging. But that's a choice. And that's kind of how I look at it, is you make a choice to, what I would say is just rest in what you know. Right. And part of that is experience.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have these experiences, like when you feel the truth and stuff like is going to happen, then you let life do what it's going to do to either bring it or not bring it or whatever. But at least you're in alignment with what you know is true. Right. Without really attaching to the outcome, because the outcome sometimes doesn't happen because something changes or somebody makes a different decision, just like we talked about.
Oh,
right?
And another experience we had. So we both felt like this move that was coming for like 3 years within Jackson, within where we live. And it felt really true. It had all those vibrations of truth to it. And then it didn't happen. Like it ended, something happened and it ended. And I was like devastated. And so I allowed myself to be devastated. But then when I was ready, I buckled in and I used my awareness and I used my sight and I used my feeling sensing. And I'm like, okay, what do I need to know about this situation? Like, why did this end? And then I saw Michael's being show up and he's like, I didn't want it anymore. I chose differently. And I was like, hey, you could have let me know. Okay. But I just felt that truth in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't make my devastation go away. Because our minds, we have to understand, right? Our human feels safe when we understand why something didn't happen. And I knew that wasn't all the reasons of why, because I could feel it wasn't all the reasons of why, but it was one reason that he was actually gearing towards not choosing this anymore for like, I don't know, a few weeks or so. And then I see this psychically, right? I feel like, oh, one of the reasons why this move didn't happen is because his being said, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this place.
It's funny when she said that, I wasn't necessarily consciously aware of it, but when she said that, then I kind of could feel the truth in my body, like, oh yeah, she's right. That is actually what I was feeling.
So this is because we were both devastated that this move didn't happen, that we were literally gearing towards for 3 years.
Yeah.
Had all the friggin' things of pictures in our house, looking around, right? We did all the things. And it kept feeling like, oh my God, any day, 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 any day. And then when it didn't happen and that was over, that phase was over, and I looked at why, and I saw his being show me, I said, hey, I just sat with this and this is the information I got. Like, does this feel true for you? Does this resonate? And that's when he was like, like, oh, I wasn't conscious exactly, but when you say it, yeah, I consciously
feel
chose
the
I want
truth.
this.
Yeah. I feel the truth in that. I mean, there was a lot of attachment to this too. So that's
much attachment.
so, but again, there's attachment, there's the bedazzled, and then there's what's true. And it's just like, again, it's like, I was pretty attached to the bedazzled, but at the same point I knew the frequency of truth. So when she said that, and I just like, oh yeah, that kind of locked in place. It's like conjuncted in place. And I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And then we could like work with, well, why did he make this choice? And, you know, it was a good thing. It was actually, at the end of the day, us not having this thing happen was actually a good thing. So now it's a year later and we're like, thank God. Like we were devastated for a while and it kind of ripped the rug under us because it felt so true. And we did all the things like, oh, I'm not trusting. Did we get it wrong? Was it an illusion? You know, we asked all the hard questions. And
Well, the interesting thing, and I think this is really like a fourth layer, is, you know, you have your intuition, and this went on for years, right? And the truth of it is, in that time, we had done we're always doing our spiritual work, and we had grown a ton.
So it didn't fit us.
And so it didn't fit us. It fit us originally, but we'd healed so many things, so many layers, that when we actually got to it, that you know, that it didn't really fit us anymore where we were presently. So that's another aspect of this, of why sometimes things won't necessarily turn out the way you think, is you're healing your stuff. If you're doing your work, your spiritual work, you grow, and sometimes you don't need those experiences anymore.
Yeah, and you're not necessarily conscious that it doesn't fit anymore, right? So when I saw that and then we talked about it and we really started to explore, like, does this really fit us anymore? And after a year later, the answer is definitely no. But in the beginning, it was really hard because we were devastated, you know?
Yeah.
So we want to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
So raise your hand or press star 9 on your phone.
Or type in your questions.
Or type in your question. And Erin, Heather. So I'm just looking at the Q&A right now. Heather's like, ego the storyteller. I'm like, that's a good one. Totally is.
So true.
So I want to read what Erin wrote. Hi, Erin. Thank you for sharing whatever this is. So she said, I resonate about the mind creating a story around intuition. I'm receiving, and I love the bedazzled idea. My husband often gets intuitive nudges about people's energy, and if they may not be telling the truth. Right now, he's worried about work issues. What do you do when your intuition is telling you something bad is going to happen? Normally, I would say fear is something not to allow as a motive for trusting your intuition, but those feelings can be so powerful. I love your tips. Thanks.
I mean, I know what comes to my mind.
Yeah, why don't you say?
I think the thing is fear of something bad happening. I think you have to dive into that a little bit to understand that more. I know one time, maybe we've told the story, I can't remember. We were in Chicago with a friend, staying with a friend, and we were at a concert, and we were coming back to her place. It was, I don't know if it was quite dark yet. It was dusk. Dark. It was like dusk, almost dark. Yeah. And we were about ready to walk down the stairs to walk by the water. And my intuition, all of a sudden, just like somebody slapped me, was just like, do not go down there. And I felt violence. Like, I felt like if we went down the stairs, that we were putting ourselves in peril. And I just have, again, with history and just with experience, I trust that. So I guess it's going to depend on, like with your husband, you know, that fear, you know, is it actually his intuition,
or is it the fear,
or is it the emotionality of it? You know, because the other thing is, if there's he has legitimate that's intuition, then I think you can start asking specific questions. Okay, am I supposed to do something about this? Right? And then what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to stay? Am I supposed to go? You can start this is where I would start to kind of map out kind of a logical question, I try to keep it to more yes and no, and then you get down to something more open-ended. Kind of depends on how you work. We talked about that before. So that's where it's tough, because I can't with his intuition, what he's talking about, it doesn't, for me, just kind of tuning into it, doesn't necessarily feel like it's all just his fear. But I can't say for sure. So that's a question for him to like really get clear about that.
Yeah. And if you want to type in again, like, is his fear that something bad's going to happen at work? Like what is the fear?
Right.
Or is it the fear of, something foreboding is going to go down?
Yeah. I mean, I think
feel
the thing
that.
is there's something there. I don't know what it is. And sometimes you don't know what it is. And sometimes I think you feel that, then you have to kind of walk through life and then figure out, okay, I'm going to set the intention like, hey, alert me if I need to take an action. Like I'm in danger or I need to do something. Give me notice so I clearly understand this so I can make a shift. I need to leave the building or depending on what's going on, or you know what I mean? I need to sell all my stock because the stock market's going to crash or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, to be clear, what's your intuition and what's your emotion? Right.
And sometimes too, like because of what's going on in the world right now, we can get these feelings of like this foreboding, like something's going down. And the only thing we can do about that is trust our intuition and be like, well, is there something I need to do? Do I need to do some prep? Do I need to have some food? Do I need to have some water? The kind of, because there is a difference between fear of something bad's going to happen versus something's going down. I feel it and I know it.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to ask.
Yeah.
Her husband is what is it? And then if it's both, if he can tease out the emotional fear part and then stay with really what that.
Yeah, because sometimes that emotional fear, a lot of people who prep, if you were to look at them from a past life point of view, is they have a lot of trauma about these world-ending situations. And so that trauma has never been healed. And so it drives them to prep. Okay. So it's about doing what's true. But if you're caught up in the emotion because of a past trauma, whether it's a past in this life or a past life trauma, that has a little bit different flavor. And to understand that that's flavoring. It may be driving it. It may be just flavoring it. It may be flavoring the feeling. And so I think that's important as well. Because I think the thing is this is where you have to get like really, this is back to the spiritual sommelier again. It's about getting really precise with what you're feeling. And so like, hey, is this energy a trauma? Is it, I'm feeling it now and it makes me afraid? Is it, it could be something like from your childhood, right? That's being triggered because of the situation or something you experienced in your life, right? There's a lot of things that happened in my family business that then now in the business now will trigger me because of that experience, because it wasn't positive. And so that memory or that emotion, the more I heal it, the more I heal these emotions, they're sort of neutral. And the unhealed emotions still have charge around them. And sometimes that will bring it in and I have to really separate and be like, okay, I can feel that frequency of my past with my family business. I acknowledge that. And then what's underneath that or what's beside it? Yeah,
like when COVID we first heard of it before it even started to affect everything, before things started to shut down. Michael was like, hey, this thing's happening. And we really tuned into our intuition. What do we do? So it was true for us to get a freezer. So we did. It was true for us to go to the store and stock up on food. So we did. It was true for us to get water things. So we did. And then because of like what Michael's saying, because of his past, he can tend to go more overboard about that. And because I don't have that same charge, I'm like, hey, this feels true to get a freezer. Feels true to stock the freezer, feels true to get water, but this other stuff just doesn't. And it's such a difference of like knowing ourselves, of like when we're going over the line, because it has a charge to it versus, okay, this just feels like right and it feels true.
I think that's just it. When you're caught up in your emotions, there's that energetic kind of stickiness. There's a charge to it. There's a flavor to it. Whereas your intuition is smooth and calm and you can rest in it. Yeah, I think that's an important one.
Even if your intuition is loud, like when Michael got that feeling in Chicago, don't go down those stairs. It still had that calm quality. Even though it was a quick warning.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with that. It was a situation where it was underneath. It was firm. because it needed to be, because we were making a turn, right? We were going to literally walk down the stairs. So it needed to get my attention, and it did.
It had that quality of
but
truth.
but it had that flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to caller 497, and then I'm going to go back to the Q&A. You can unmute. Are you there?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi. This is Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hi.
I have a personal, like a question, an inner question that it seems to like color everything else, and I want to follow my intuition on it. And I'm not really sure. The question is like, if I should move from this town that I live in. And I think that I have some past fears around, where I live, how to find a place. And, I've been moving around a lot recently. Can you help me with some simple questions?
I'm gonna start, because what keeps coming up for me is, do you really want to know the answer for yourself? I mean, do you actually want to know? Like, if it's true, like if you ask your intuition and you're like, okay, I'm gonna ask my intuition, is it true for me to go? Yes or no? And so on and so forth. But do you really truly want to know the answer to that? That's my first question.
Yeah, I feel so much fear.
Yeah, that's really clear when you're talking. Like, why are you so scared?
But beyond the fear, do you actually want to know? Because I don't know if I believe you, I'll be honest. Just feeling you. And that, it's not a judgment. It's just, I'm just trying to bring clarity.
Like that I actually don't want to know.
Yeah, I would say if you gave it a percentage, like what part of you wants to know, what part of you doesn't. I mean, are you like 100% like, I want to know? I'm afraid, but I want to know. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's foundational. It's like, you've got to get to the point, like, I am fucking terrified. I don't know what to do. I don't know where this is going to lead me. I don't know if I'm having enough, whatever, but I want to know. Like, that scale's tipped. And
and what I want to add is start with the fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of, because you can't go over it, can't go under it, right? We've all tried.
Okay.
So I would be like, why am I so terrified?
Okay. The other thing too, I guess the question that comes up to ask is, how much of this fear is yours? I
was going to ask that too. Yeah.
Do you have a sense of that on a scale of 100? How much of that fear is yours? Is it all yours? What number comes up for you when you just ask that question?
30.
Yeah. So that means 70% of those bags, put the bags down. Yeah, because it's being influenced.
Yeah.
I don't know by whom. You don't necessarily need to know by whom. It's just, again, it's a choice to be like, okay, I recognize 30% of this is mine. I'll deal with mine, my fear. This other stuff, I'm going to give it to source. Send it back to the sender. Return to sender, as a friend used to say to me. Right? And make that choice clearly to be like, I do not want this.
And you stay with the 30.
Yeah, then you stay with the 30 and start unpacking that.
Stay with the 30.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing about this stuff, when the energy starts to enhance it, is it makes it so cloudy and it makes it so enhanced.
Yeah, it's so enhanced.
I mean, believe me, we deal with this shit all the fucking time.
Like, so right before the show,
yeah.
I was getting severely attacked.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the F? Like,
yeah. So it's
why?
So that's why I keep giving these tools. And I like really try to keep them basic, because like literally, like, we unpack these tools like literally 50 times a day.
Right.
For this very reason. Because we're constantly getting screwed with energetically. It's just part of being a human being.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have choice, you have agency. So you can be like, hey, 30% of this mine. I will deal with that. I'm scared of dealing with it. I may not want to, but I will. Other stuff, no. That goes away now, right? And I encourage you, when you do that and you say that and you mean it, to actually energetically feel it, what it happens to that energy. Because there's real power in that, if that makes sense. Like when you make a choice and you mean it, you can really cleave this stuff off, right? It's like making the choice, like I am scared to deal with this fear, but I will. I'm scared to know what to do, but that scale's tipping, I want to. The minute you really dig into that and it's real, man, the minute you follow that, you'll start to see stuff crystallize. Like literally structures will begin building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what,
Yeah, it is the best feeling.
Where I'd start with what we said.
Yeah.
Thank you, love.
Because then you'll know what to do. I mean, you will know what to do. That's the thing is you can make, this is again, when we talk about self-empowered, this is about conversations. This is about you empowering yourself because you actually know the answer to this. You get the stuff out of your way. You look at your fear and be with what's really driving that and work to heal that and then really want to know. And then you ask that question, what should I do?
Boom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, girl. Get it. Get it. Get it.
Thank you.
Thank you, love. Okay, I'm going to go back to the Q&A. This thing. Okay, that's Zoom. Trying to lower the hand. So I'm just going to go back to Erin because she answered. So she says, thanks. This is great advice. There is some reorganization planned in the company. He's been in a volatile industry, so there is a past history of things going down, affecting his and others' employment. I trust the intuition, but there's also past trauma. And I wonder if he's telling himself a story that something is going to happen to adversely affect his employment. I like suggestion of going within and asking if he needs to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. I mean, when your whole livelihood depends on this,
God.
I mean, to separate
So
yourself
hard.
enough to be clear-eyed is really challenging. It can be done. You have to really want to, but it's hard because you're
takes time.
attached. I mean,
Yeah.
That's where maybe you as a partner, if you want to engage in a conversation, if you're able to do that with him, where you can maybe hold that space where you can be that neutral. If you can be neutral, where then you can sort of walk through this to really discern what's story and what's actually true. And then really with what is true, figure out if there's anything to do right now. And then if yes, what is there to do specifically? Right. So you can kind of walk through that like that.
Yeah. It's like we all have this yarn, this ball of yarn that we have to tease out. Like you said, there's past there.
Yeah.
There's trauma there, and there's also intuition. It's like we tease it. It's just so challenging because it's like it's our own stuff. Like when you see it in someone else, you're like, dude, just do this. Like, what's your problem? Right?
Yeah, that's sometimes
But
like
it's hard.
when you're working with a healer with that, sometimes they can ask you questions because they're neutral, which is what we try to do on this show, or we're not attached. And so it gives us, we can help bring clarity because we don't have the same attachment.
Right.
I mean, we need that as well sometimes with us.
So I want to read what Cece says. She says, so don't attach to the outcome or things or people. Like if it doesn't work out, don't attach to how it turned out. Let it be how it goes. It's not right or wrong. It just may be not the time for what you were feeling into or hoping for. Keep moving forward without making it a bad thing.
Yeah, totally.
This is really helpful.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And we, on this path, we can get just so insane about gotta know the truth. Oh my God, my intuition. Oh my God, right? We freak out because we put so much onus on getting it right or getting the truth right or knowing the truth right or, you know what I mean, right? It just gets so much onus versus what Cece said, it's not wrong. It's not bad. How do we just walk through it, right?
And I think what's coming up too, and with the question about the job too, is sometimes a interesting question to ask is, what am I to learn from this situation, right? How am I to grow? What's life trying to teach me?
Yeah.
Because that gives you sometimes a high level perspective of why this is happening, so that way you get the lesson.
Like,
Sometimes that's helpful.
yeah. So, because of this topic, was it early? Something happened earlier today where I had fear about something, and it was really strong. It was like fear of something not happening or fear of something being taken away. I can't remember exactly what it was. And it just kept coming and coming and coming. And I hadn't really had time yet to just like sit with it and be present with it. And because we're getting ready for the show and stuff. And so I was in the bathroom after my shower, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take a minute. Just be like, okay, I have this really intense fear. It's okay. It's okay. Like, I have fear. And I know it's not my truth. And I don't know what the fuck this is, but it's fear, and I'm okay. Like, I'm going to start there. Like, so I don't master this thing yet. Okay. Like, I'm all right. It's part of my path. I'm okay. But then I asked, like what Michael just said, what is my opportunity of this fear being up right now? What am I to learn from this? And all of a sudden I was taken back to when my brother died. So I was 2.5 years old and he was 13 months old. And all of a sudden I was taken back there. And quickly I saw, like, because he died, I immediately somehow made it mean like my intuition was wrong, or like somehow I made it my fault, like my knowing's fault or my intuition's fault, and it didn't make sense mentally, but I felt like, oh, there's something here. And when I really started to feel the upset in my body of like, because he died, I then made it, the story was then, oh, my intuition was off, my knowing was off, something was off. And I just knew that wasn't true, even though I didn't understand the whole story of what I was seeing and feeling. But I knew the trauma that I'm like, oh, this is why I have such an issue when I have something up that I'm not solving yet. I'm like, okay, this is making sense. So it is so interesting when you start like kind of getting the larger picture of like, why is this even happening to me? Like, what am I to learn here? What's my opportunity? So yeah, that just happened to me.
Yeah. That's where sometimes these questions can help. You can pull back, ask a question, a high level question that helps kind of refocus the energy. So that way you can look at it I call it looking at it from the side. She hates that.
So like, I'll ask him something and I'm like,
I'm on my phone usually.
We're like focused on something, and then he'll like grab his phone and he'll start doing stuff. And I'm like, dude, are you just like not being present now? And I'm doing all the work. And he's like, I'm looking at it from the side. He's like, sometimes if I look directly at it, it's easier for me to do something and work with it on the side. So yeah, we have a joke. You looking at that from the side, you just running away. Yeah, exactly. What you doing?
Sometimes I run away.
Sometimes he runs away.
Again, this whole thing, and I want to remind you, and again, we say this in many shows, is you do the best that you can do. I mean, just do the best that you can do. Sometimes, you post game it and you realize, wow, I could do better in these things. I didn't feel this, but now I understand it. And you take that information, you apply it next time. You just do the best that you can do, right?
Yep. That's why today I was like, well, I have unresolved fear. I don't know what the hell this is. And I'm okay. So what if it's not resolved? Because that's a hard thing for me. Like, if I don't know what it is and I can deal with it and I know where my awareness needs to be, I don't like that feeling. And today I was practicing like, well, I don't know what this is. I don't have time for this right now to deal with this. I'm just going to be a mess, and that's okay. Like, that's okay. And I really felt like, this kind of being okay thing is growing in me, So I want to read Shireen. Hi. She says, thank you for sharing these life experiences. I have felt this much of my journey regarding my gifts turning on. I can feel that that's still true. Oh, I can feel that still true knowing, and the bedazzled stories on top of it. My hopes for timing now, haha, right now, and the fears of how might people respond. I found it's enough to just keep returning to the still trueness that is consistent through all the other aspects, and hold space with the hope, the fears. I thought you said the tears, but it's probably like, yep, it would be tears too, with the hopes, the fears, and the longings of bedazzling. It's certainly a curious adventure. I find myself just holding space with it all without expectations is where I can rest is the best. Where can I rest is the best? Rest is the best. Hashtag rest is the best.
That's right.
Oh, so good. So I'm going to read from Katie. Hi, Miss Katie. I'm totally sitting in the space of waiting for the new house that hasn't appeared yet. I thought, like your story, that my house had arrived. But then I walked into the house that thought was mine, and it smelled terrible. She capitalized smelled. And it couldn't be mine. And now I'm wondering how to discern if I have done all of my part and have to wait, or if there's something I'm missing. I struggle with that level of discernment. So I'm doing nothing extra, just waiting and seeing. Not sure if this is a question. Yeah, it's a question. So I go to the question of like, how do I know if there's more to do versus do I just wait? That's when you go within and you're like, is there more to do? Yes or no? Or do I just wait? So you just keep going back to the drawing board, going back to your heart, going back to the truth, being like, okay, I just had this experience. Is there anything else I'm missing? Yes or no? Is there anything I need to heal, understand, look at, work with, move forward in, let go of? Like, you can just ask, is there anything else, excuse me, I need to do right now? Or is it just a timing? I just need to wait. So that's what I would say.
I think too, Katie, that part of this is life gives you false starts to kind of test whether you'll just jump, even if you know it's not right for you. And this is like a little test. Even though it's not going to be, it's not right for you right now, it sort of dangles this to kind of see what you're going to do.
Mm.
Yeah. I know that's not very fun, but
Well,
that's
life's
what it feels.
a biatch then.
Sometimes. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think life is really testing to be like, hey, do you really get this? Are you really sure that you got this? And it keeps kind of challenging you on this. So that's what I feel like is life's bringing these things where they're dangling these things for you to kind of see what you're going to do. Are you going to stay with what's true? And even though you don't like it, it's not comfortable, or are you going to say, fuck it, I'm jumping in? Right? That's hard. But life does that sometimes.
Yeah, because it's, like we could say life or source or the truth of us or God or the angels or spirit or the universe. It loves us unconditionally. Like it's unconditional love. And it's the only thing really at the end of the day, not a human, because human loves conditionally, like it can't help it. And humans don't want other humans to suffer because like, oh, right, we feel bad. Life really is the only thing. True love is the only thing that can hold space for somebody to go through their worst suffering, come out the other side, because life knows what that person's up to, right? So it can create these scenarios because it squeezes the person all the way down to their core fear. And life's like holding space, really allowing that person to go all the way down into their depths of darkness and out the other side. And it's like really only life or God or source or our true self can hold space like that, because humanly and emotionally, we just want the suffering to stop. We just want somebody else that we're loving. We don't want them to suffer. We just want it to stop. But really only life, unconditional love, can let us go through that. It's very powerful.
Yeah. I think the other question too that can be asked specifically in this situation is, you're on this journey and you can step back and be really honest with yourself and be like, am I off path? Right? I'm following my intuition. Am I off path? Yes or no? Because that clarifies it a lot. Is sometimes you could do these things and you're like, man, why did I go down this road? Am I off my path? And it's like, maybe not. Maybe you're not. Maybe this is, you had to have this experience. You had to connect with this person, or again, it tests you to make sure to see if you're clear about what you really want.
And you're reminding me of like another section of why our intuition tells us to do something and it doesn't work out. A lot of times our intuition will tell us to go forward with somebody only to unravel something or heal something. So our intuition says, yes, date this person, or yes, make that phone call, or yes, get into business with this person. And then it ends up being a clusterfuck. So we go, oh my God, was my intuition wrong? Actually, no. You had to go into that situation to unravel this karmic mess so you can be free. and that soul can be free. So that can happen a lot as well.
Yeah. That is very common. I mean, there's times you enter into stuff and then you look back, I was like, oh, that wasn't true to get into it at all. And it's a clusterfuck. But there are times that there's things to clean up with people. There's energy to exchange with people. I've had that happen many times where there's been like, I get drawn to go somewhere and I don't know why, but then then I get there and there's just this, I don't necessarily communicate with a person, but there's energy to exchange.
Like there's so many reasons why our intuition tells us to do something. And we just keep practicing staying with the original.
What's true?
Intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Original.
Yeah.
Original. All right, my loves. That's our time for today. I feel like we should stop now. Feels right. So, yeah, the only thing I want to just reiterate again is to just keep practicing. What is my original intuition? Like my friend, she got to apply for this job, but then she was like, I'm going to get it. And all these things are going to happen. But it turns out her applying for that job even though she didn't get it, her and her husband had all these positive things. More money actually happened. More work actually happened for both of them. Like who would have thought, right? What is the original? What is the original? What is the original? What is the original feeling? And if it brings you somewhere that's uncomfortable and you really know, well, my intuition was right because I know myself and I know my intuition. I had to go to this uncomfortable situation because it was just what was right for me. I had to unravel something. I had to heal something. I had to get my energy back from something. It's really powerful when we can start trusting, right? In this different way. Not the story, not to be dazzled, but trusting the original. The original. Yeah. I feel like I just want to take a moment because it was a lot of information. It was good stuff what you guys shared. Thank you so much for sharing. So vulnerable. Like even when you're, even though it's typing, like I feel you, I feel your heart, I feel your vulnerability, I feel your honesty, I feel your rawness. And it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful. So thank you guys so much for being here with us. I feel like there's a bunch of stuff we should probably say, but I don't know.
Well, I guess I would just, as always, really appreciate you attending and asking questions and watching this. And if you get value out of this, please, on YouTube, like and subscribe, share this with other people you think that might get something out of this that's valuable. We had some people posted on their personal Facebook to just say how much this is helping. And if you feel like doing that, please do that. That really helps us, and we really appreciate that.
And it's streaming live on Facebook, so it'll be on Amujam Rose under mine, and you can share it to your people. And the whole show is there.
Yeah.
What else do we want to say? Anything?
Not that I can think of.
Good for now. All right, my loves. We'll be back in 2 Tuesdays. I just want to also share that I just put out an email a few hours ago that I'm doing 2 group power healing sessions again this week. Spirit wants to do 2 because this energy is so dang potent and intense. So it's Friday and Saturday. You can go to my site, amajamhealing.com, and you'll see Join Next Group page, and all the info is on there. And if you want to get on my email list to get all those invites, all the info is on the bottom of the site. So we'll be rocking and rolling this weekend.
That's right. I've got an interview coming up with 3 intuitive healers. I don't know when that's going to be out, probably next 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. So we'll let you know about that. So excited about that.
Yeah. Michael and his lonesome going to be doing it by himself. It's good. All right, my loves. Blessings to you. Thank you so much for being with us. Such a pleasure and an honor. And we see you in 2 Tuesdays, our next show.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.